This is the beach of Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands. It was on this island that many lives were lost. Many lives were changed. It was here in the middle of the 20th century that one man made a difference for so many in the name of liberty and freedom that we still have today. Let's revisit and remember how it all came to pass.
It was December 7th, 1941, a Sunday. The weather had partly cloudy skies, the temperature hovered in the mid-70s, and the winds were calm. The night shift of one of the docks of Pearl Harbor were gathering for a pickup game of baseball, though it was football season. Baseball was America's pastime, and the Yanks and the Bronx Bombers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, were still being talked about and argued about. Church bells clang of many denominations for the call for prayer. Radio station KGMB in Honolulu was on the air with the latest in the Dorsey, Sinatra, Ellington, and traditional Hawaiian music. At an Army base named Hickam Field, Army troops were getting ready for breakfast. On a section of that base was a radar site to detect any airplane in its vicinity. It was a small crew, and one of the members was a 23-year-old Army corporal named George, and his friends gave him the nickname of Wit, a shortened version of his last name. They were instructed to be on alert for a flight of unarmed B-17s arriving in from the state of California. Rumors circulated of a mini-sub around the waters of Oahu. The radar station showed blips, but from another direction, and the Chief Master Sergeant felt it was just seabirds and false echo due to the weather conditions that early in the morning. At 7:54 a.m. Pacific Time, the last minute of peace for the next 3 years and 9 months was fading away. At 7:55 a.m., swarms of green planes with red circles flew out of the rising sun of that Sunday morning, through the Hawaiian valleys, and up over dormant volcanoes, over the fields of macadamia and pineapples, and over houses came the deafening roar of their Mitsubishi engines. They dove onto the naval base of Pearl Harbor, extending a deadly satanic invitation to war. Black plumes suddenly covered the bright sunlight of the Cuban Missile. Screams of friends quickly silenced, and the death knell of ships heaved with artificial thunder. Japan was attacking. The United States was once again at war. Americans scrambled for machine guns to answer back these cowardly invaders of the peace. At Hickam Field, George and his comrades jumped into a sandbag machine gun nest to open fire at these sons of bonsai. We don't know if he and his comrades downed any planes, but they tried. America was awakened, never to sleep again.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
As the war in the Pacific was underway, George found himself guiding planes over the hump to supply and feed the troops of our British allies and the troops of nationalist China and Burma. When Japan surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, Pearl Harbor veterans that could be spared marched into Tokyo Bay. George was among them. Peace was again in place, though shaky. In 1948, the Soviet Union closed the gates to West Berlin, violating an international agreement between them, Great Britain, France, and the United States. George was called upon, as several others were, to help guide U.S. planes over Soviet-controlled territory to supply and feed the starving Germans of West Berlin. The flights were steady and frequent. George would find himself being flown in and out of Berlin for rest periods, wondering if they would be shot down at any given moment. When he flew back in, he and fellow servicemen saw the faces of the German children. Some were scared, eyes that were blank, no smiles, just a quiet plea to be released from this barren, bombed-out city. Some were orphans, casualties of war. Their servicemen would hand out Hershey bars to the children, who quickly snatched them, ate them with a fury, or as George wrote in his photo album, broke off as many pieces as they could to give to the smaller children who couldn't be more than 3 or 2. Then suddenly, a few days later, small white handkerchief parachutes would float to the ground to the children from the Allied planes on their final approach to the airstrip at Berlin. Dangling from the parachutes were Hershey bars. The airmen would soon be called, but chock with soldiers by the children. George was one of them. Some parachutes fell into the Soviet zone of Germany, and the Soviet military representative protested vigorously. The Allied command took it under advisement and told the airmen to cease, but they never did, and the Allied Air Command looked the other way. Soon, more parachutes would accidentally float into the Soviet zone. A few months later, the Soviets removed the blockade to Berlin, and once again, Germans were allowed to cross over the border and travel in freedom. A few months later, George was transferred to Yucca Flats, Nevada, where he was ordered to take part in atomic bomb cloud radiation tests. He flew in and around the clouds, along with many other military personnel. A year later, he got married, had a son born in Dallas, Texas. Another Texan in the family, he exclaimed to everyone. Soon after, he was transferred to the Alaskan Territory. There, he once again was on radar duty. The Cold War was tense, and he had to watch air traffic from the Soviet Union. He had another son who was born in Alaska. A year later after that, George's health was failing. He was transferred to San Antonio, Texas, where the Air Force hospital facilities were better. He had lung cancer and passed away December 25th, 1956, the morning of Christmas. He was Tech Sergeant George Arnold Whitworth, my father. I am Ray Arnold Whitworth, a proud son, a proud American. His father made the supreme sacrifice. I was only 1 year old when he died, but I know him all the same. To all those who have given their lives in the name of our country, thank you. For all who have served and are serving our country, thank you. Remember, this week, Pearl Harbor.